A mountain stream, a child of rain, all gossip and curiosity, ran hectic down the mountain side and vanished, all of a sudden, into the green forest. The green forest was vast, and the green forest was beautiful. And far away, where the trees finally gave way to the fields and the villages of men, an older, wiser river mumbled contentedly to itself and meandered to the sea. Now deep in the green forest, by a stream, there lived a little girl. And the little girl loved the forest, and the forest loved the little girl. The sound of the little girl's sudden laughter was as familiar to the forest as the wind that played amongst the autumn leaves, or the birds that sang high up amongst the trees. The little girl lived with her mother and her father. And her father was strong and kind, and her mother was wise and beautiful. And each evening, when the little girl went to bed, her mother would tell her the story of the forest. Now the story of the forest was always different, but it would always begin in the same way, where the snow lay thick and white upon all the land, and the bare trees like the letters of some strange alphabet that only needed to be deciphered to reveal a wonderful mystery, a mystery that the little girl's mother would reveal each evening with the blossoms of spring or the ringing of bluebells. Now one day, when the little girl was playing in the forest, she saw something she'd never seen before. An old gentleman and his caravan, and there was his horse nearby eating the grass. The little girl didn't approach the old gentleman. Instead, she hid behind a bush and she watched. It soon seemed to the little girl that there must be something very special about this old gentleman. For even when he cleaned his plate out of which he'd eaten his dinner, and even when he filled his pipe full of tobacco, he did it with such kindness, with such love and care. The little girl thought perhaps it was a magic plate, or perhaps it was a magic pipe. The little girl walked home, and she told her mother what she had seen. And her mother looked quite concerned. And that evening, when the little girl went to bed, and after her mother had told her the story of the forest, instead of falling asleep, she stayed awake, and she listened. She soon heard her father go out into the forest, and it wasn't long before he returned with the stranger. And soon her mother and her father and the strange old gentleman from the forest were all laughing as though they were old friends. In the morning, the little girl's mother said that it would be quite all right for her daughter to speak to the old gentleman in the forest. So that day, when the little girl became bored of playing hide and seek with the squirrels, off she went and introduced herself to the stranger. Well, they soon became great friends, for the old gentleman told wonderful stories, and he told the little girl the secrets of the running things and the growing things, and he told her about the craftsman's hands that had made his plate and the pipe out of which he smoked his tobacco. And by, and little by little, the little girl's eyes grew wider and wiser. Well, one day, when the little girl went to visit her friend in the forest, he had some sad news. He said that he'd soon be leaving, and that he'd probably never see the little girl again. Well, she was very sad, and when the old gentleman saw how sad she was, he picked up a twig from the forest floor, and before her very eyes it turned into a rose. The little girl walked home, but she was still very sad. But she needn't have been so sad, for now she lived in a world where a twig might turn into a rose. The little girl showed the rose to her mother, and her mother said that her daughter must go out into the forest, and she must find a very special place, a place that is beautiful in the summertime and beautiful in the winter-time too, and there she must plant her rose. But her daughter said, "But mother, it is the winter-time, and the snow lies thick and white upon all the land. My rose will surely die." But her mother said that if she found a very special place, and if she visited her rose every day, and if she loved her rose, then it would never die. So the little girl went out into the forest, and she knew just the place, a place that was beautiful in the summertime, when the sun sprinkled through the green leaves, and beautiful in the winter-time too, where it made a little temple of snow, where she'd have her most precious and her most secret thoughts. And there she planted her rose. And just as her mother had told her, she visited her rose every day. Well, winter turned to spring, and spring turned to summer, and the strange thing was, the little ring of snow around her rose never melted. It was her rose in a winter garden, and she loved it very much. And stranger still, that summer seemed so much more beautiful, for that memory of winter, the snow around her rose, and the following winter, when it came, seemed so much more beautiful, for that bright red drop of summer, her rose in the winter garden. And by, and little by little, she saw the child stream and the old man river. She saw the cruel claw and the magic in the eagle's eye, and her own little eyes grew wider and wiser. One day, when the little girl went to visit her rose in the forest, there lying beside it was a bird, and the bird had died. She picked it up in her little hands, and she saw its perfect feathers and the fire in its eye, which even then was fading. And she felt sad, as only a little girl can feel sad, when she realizes that something that was once beautiful had passed away. Well, a little tear grew in the corner of her eye, rolled down her cheek, and fell upon her rose. And then it was. The bird lived and flew and sang high up amongst the trees. But when she looked down, one by one, the petals were falling from her rose. The snow was melting, and soon it was, her rose in the winter garden was no more. The little girl walked home, and she was full of joy and sadness. Joy for the bird that had lived, but sadness for her rose. But she needn't have been so sad, for the rose in the winter garden that had died in the forest would live forever in the forest of the little girl's heart.